Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are taking a look across Microsoft's Copilot landscape to understand where the company is really advancing its AI plans in the commercial space and some of today's best opportunities for customers. My guests are Nathan Bench, Vice President for Microsoft Enterprise Solutions at enVista, and Hilary Schwartzbach, Practice Lead for Customer Engagement Applications and Power Platform Solutions at enVista. enVista is the sponsor of this episode, and we start by talking about the broad and expanding landscape of Microsoft's Copilot tools, which now spans development, productivity tools, and enterprise solutions like Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. Some people are understandably excited to put the latest Copilots to use today, but Nathan and Hilary have observed a range of reactions to their technology so far, from skepticism to enthusiastic pilot programs. They tell us more about how customers are responding and why deploying AI workloads is going to be closely tied to strong IT fundamentals in areas like data management, security, and process. Okay, I'm here with Nathan Bench and Hilary Schwartzbach of enVista. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, glad to have you. I thought maybe we could just start with some introductions for our listeners. Hilary, do you want to go first?
Sure. Again, I'm Hilary Schwartzbach. I am the practice lead for our customer engagement applications and the Power Platform applications here at enVista.
And then my name's Nathan Bench. I'm the Vice President over Microsoft Enterprise Solutions at enVista.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you both being here. There's so much to talk about around the theme of Microsoft's Copilot activities, investments, progress, roadmap. So I really want to get into it. At a high level, your team has obviously been paying attention to what's going on with Microsoft's Copilot features across the Dynamics 365 applications. I thought we could just start by getting a sense from each of you of what capabilities, what advances you think your clients at enVista have found most intriguing so far, where you think they will become some well-used or high-value capabilities.
Yeah, sure. So I can cover that from an enterprise standpoint. There's still, a lot of confusion specifically because, Microsoft's done such a great job. They've got I think Hilary, 35 or more. Copilots. Yeah. They keep coming out with new ones every week. They'll rebrand other items and call it Copilot. So the biggest thing that we've been working with our clients is really kind of understanding, based on the products they have right now, which Copilots might be the most effective for them. We feel specifically, Microsoft's kind of gotten little steps for people to kind of get into AI. A lot of our clients right now are probably having a lot of people use ChatGPT out there right now. They're dropping their data in there. They're paranoid about people using ChatGPT because they know that information is kind of being put out into public. So we usually recommend that they look at utilizing, Bing Enterprise Chat. Right. So Microsoft's kind of come out with that capability where the information is kind of isolated to your Bing search engine for your enterprise, but the information that you put in there that is using GPT-4o, they're actually going through that process and making sure that that data doesn't leave the enterprise. So that's kind of one step that people are looking at. I think the one area that people probably have been using it more than anything is the developers at the moment because of GitHub. Copilot's been out. Probably it was their first one really that they put out there, and GitHub Copilot X. So for developers going out there, finding ideas, being able to kind of take their thoughts and get some code or at least a base has kind of really been the area that has really kind of taken off. The enterprise is just kind of in a wait and see approach, because the big one coming out that a lot of our clients want is really that Microsoft M365 Copilot. The idea that I can go in there, look at our documents, be able to pull in information, use Word and PowerPoint. That's the one that I feel clients are really, really wanting to get more of and take a look at. But from what Microsoft's done right now is it's a very small group. They've had 300, I think was the total that they were kind of using as a small subset to kind of test this out. They've now announced that they're going to have the general release available November 1st. But even within that group, it's only for those that have enterprise agreements. And there's a minimum of 300 licenses that you have to pick, that you have to have to start with. So for clients, that means with $30 a user per a month at, 300, you're looking at a large cost per month to start with to get into Microsoft 365 Copilot. So it'll be very interesting. Microsoft's made it very clear that, they're not missing out on the small and medium-sized companies and those run by CSPs, which is a very large majority of their actual clients. But that information probably won't be till the beginning of the year. I think they're going to see how these big enterprise clients get in there to work on it. And I've already started to see kind of out there in the community, people work on ways that you can kind of maybe get some tentative testing of it. And I think Microsoft's starting to realize that there's such a big need for that Microsoft 365 Copilot that there's probably going to be adjustments as they move forward. But Hillary, I know for you on the Dynamics side, there's a big interest as well.
Absolutely. And to your point, a lot of people are really kind of looking at what that M365 will do. However, as Nathan just indicated from a dynamic side, it started with the Viva Sales, right? So there is that functionality that's out there that allows, especially their sales groups that probably are the ones that need it most, anything to do to help streamline their activities. That's a stepping stone, right? So it's evolving into that Sales Copilot that's now giving them that access into those tools that they use most often to really, as I indicated, streamline their day-to-day activities. So as more of these copilots do come out, they're looking to say that, okay, well, if I step into maybe that Bing enterprise, oh, wow. Now, like when we just had a conversation really recently with one of our clients so that they had no idea about the Bing enterprise and how it could work for them. And they were just like, their minds were just blown. And so being able to step into these different levels of AI and understand how it can work for them will evolve into, okay, now I have these little bits available to me that can really, help me execute these day-to-day activities and keep it within our tenant so it doesn't get out and only, I have access to it or the people that I need to have access to it have access to it. But then it's creating more of that grown interest into that M365 Copilot functionality.
Yeah, that's interesting. So much sort of education that has to happen to get these organizations up to speed, get the right people, I guess you'd say, in those organizations ready for this. One of the things you've touched on, and it almost seems like it crosses both the M365 side and the business app side when it comes to really getting any value out of some of these Copilot tools, is data quality and data management practices inside of an organization. It really applies to both sides almost equally. I don't want to say it starts on productivity or the M365 side. I'd love to get your thoughts about that. Like, what kind of implications does bringing Copilot tools into the mix have on the quality of a company's data and on their data management practices? Nathan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So in the end, as we know, that the large language models really aren't that successful unless they have something to ground against, which would be your data. So we refer to kind of the data sprawl. Most organizations have a data sprawl. They've had them since the dawn of time, right? There's file cabinets with documents from 20 years ago. Same with anything within any large enterprise that's been around for a while. They're going to have data within their systems all over the place. So we really encourage clients to really look at their data lifecycle management. So that's really going to come down to the categories of storage and organizing of your data, the access control, who has access to the data. Do you have a governance, or a document retention policy in place? What's your maintenance of the information? Is it optimized? Do you have stale data that's out there? What is your capabilities for archiving and deleting information? And what about compliance? A lot of clients out there have compliance policies that they have to follow. So the goal is really, if clients don't have that real strong data lifecycle management in place right now, we strongly encourage them to focus on that. And I think what you're going to see from the industry is probably for the first year, maybe 6 months to a year, it's really going to be those clients that have that strong data lifecycle management that will probably be the early adopters that'll get in there and not be worried about going in there and doing the actual implementations. The rest of it, we encourage our clients, it's going to be an evaluation of their data and what their policies are. If they're not ready, we're strongly recommending, you take a pause or you do a very small subset to test it out, but you do not just go and flip the switch. Now, Microsoft does a good job about this too, right? They put warnings out there all over the place, but even with that, everyone loves a new shiny IT object. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a good, strong lifecycle management in there. And there's some good tools out there. And I'll talk specifically the M365 side and let Hillary cover the Dynamics side. But on the Microsoft 365 side, it's Microsoft Purview. So if you're an enterprise client and you have any type of E1 licenses or above, you've got Microsoft Purview. And that's where you can go in to kind of manage your data security You can manage all your classification and tagging and all that type of information, and really organizing and cleaning it up is going to be critical before you kind of flip that switch and you let, somebody come in and start asking questions as you move forward.
Yeah, I would concur to that. I mean, I think just data in general has just been a hurdle for a lot of organizations to work through over time. However, this implementation of these AI features are really just going to emphasize the point, because a lot of these end users are ultimately going to be looking for AI to really be, on some level, that silver bullet for helping them do their job, right? And it's really going to help them with streamlining their productivity and creating all those different insights that they need to be able to complete their jobs and those activities. And when they aren't having the data, or they're not getting the responses that they would like to get, or that they've been sold as to what they're going to get with the utilization of these Copilot functionalities, you're going to have a lot of people that are just going to be frustrated and angry and turn away from this new IT shiny object. And you're going to have a lot of people just saying that it's just not working the way is intended, right? So you have a risk by not having a correct framework in place and defined before you have to start rolling this out to all of your employees.
Another dimension of this, I guess, that occurs to me is the security and data access side of it, which I guess is Nathan, where you were getting at with Purview too. You hear a lot about this. I think about it maybe more on the dynamic side, Hillary, as you were saying, with access to the right data, not too much, that asking a question of an AI, AI-enabled search tool or something isn't bringing back the wrong kind of information, or permissions aren't sort of somehow skewing the results in an unexpected way. I guess that goes back to testing, but also to just being aware, right, of what kind of access you've configured. Am I summarizing that right?
Correct. Well, it's configured and also assigned, right? So it could be a situation to where you didn't have, Nathan and I talked a little bit about this before with regards to personas and having those like security and access personas defined. And so, you could be like onboarding somebody and be like, all right, well, I need the same access that, Jim over there has. And so they go through and they just make sure that they click all the different access levels. And I am now the same as Jim, but maybe my role in my persona doesn't necessarily, I'm not supposed to have all that information, or maybe there's more that I don't have that, Jim had, or that limit that Jim had, but I need more than what Jim has. But I was given Jim as that baseline. So now when I try to use it, I'm not given the right access to the data that I need.
Yeah. And what Hillary mentioned really is from not getting too much in the weeds here with technology, but the reason Microsoft's so kind of ahead of the game and able to spit out all these copilots is that they built, a framework that they kind of built on over years, referred to as the Graph API. And so those in kind of the IT industry that do any type of development or work know about that Graph API. And that's really the way that all their different products have kind of an API layer, and they're all able to communicate back and forth to each other. But what's really powerful about it is that they set the security at those layers and at those products to be consistent. So that if Hillary has a document that is highly confidential and I happen to know the name of that document, if I were to go into Microsoft 365 and search for that document, if I even know the name of it, but I don't have access to it in that I'm not a part of the team or she didn't grant me access, it is not going to come back to me. It's not going to show up. And that same permission control is really what's going to be built into that Copilot, right, with that grounding. So the easiest way to check security, right, is to get, several different individuals that you might have as you're doing a group and have them do searching for things that maybe they shouldn't have access to. And that's really going to help you, know ahead of time before you get to AI, is that an issue right now? And again, back to, Microsoft Purview, that's where that capability really comes into play, is going, all your information that's out there, I'm going to pull it in. But even on like security Copilot, that functionality, which is more at the Azure level, Azure stack, it's the same thing. If you don't have access to it, you're not going to get that information back. Microsoft's done a really good job at it. But in the end, it's on each product owner and them managing the security that's going to be responsible for the success of the Copilot that might be touching that specific product going forward.
Two other kind of, cases I was thinking of. One is, I'd like to get your input on how content, various types of enterprise content, play into this story, and also maybe documents more specifically. And I mentioned that one just because it's certainly something you see a lot when you're talking ERP or even CRM related scenarios, that business documents that sort of flow and get either generated, approved, so forth in different business cases. How does that factor into what you expect that maybe your customers will want from Copilot-based, AI capabilities?
Again, it's really going to come down to those permissions. We feel, from a workflow standpoint, the individuals that are going to have, the most success are the ones that know about content that already exists out there. Maybe they've created it or they're on a team and they're doing collaboration. And so they can reference back to that information as they're inside the Copilot. Again, it's the content that they have access to, whether it's in Sales Copilot, where I have permissions for specific type of leads or opportunities that I'm going to pull in that information to get it. But if I don't have the access to that information, I'm not going to have much success trying to reference it versus those kind of from a document standpoint. Again, going back to kind of that categorization and labeling, if I don't have the permission granted to me directly or inherited based on what I'm actually working on, I'm not going to have much success referring back to it. So Copilot to me is really going to be the individuals that have that different access that's working on a team and they're working collaboratively across the enterprise. If I'm in some specific other team and I'm trying to work on a product, let's say marketing material, and I'm trying to pull in information, but I'm not a part of the product team, that individual is not going to have much success there, right? So the ask would be, okay, well, that individual maybe needs to be added to the product team as just a read user, right? Where they can just read the content and see it and reference it. That's where you're going to have that success moving forward. But again, if you don't have the access, you're not going to be able to use it. And that's, specifically what enterprises want. We don't want people who don't have access to be able to get any type of reference to information, just as it is today.
I'd concur with that.
All right, great. I would love to get a little more perspective on what you're seeing and hearing from real sort of Microsoft customers right now. I know, like we mentioned just in passing before we started here, a lot of interest in presentations, a lot of interest from maybe champions or sort of the most curious people to sort of bring information back to their organizations at this point. Can you share any stories or share any advice perhaps on what those kinds of the most curious, the most enthusiastic users or managers within a company or an organization should be bringing back to the rest of their team who maybe need to understand more before they really sign off or buy into putting any of these capabilities into action?
Yeah. So like Hillary mentioned before, we usually recommend you focus on the user personas, right? Who are your personas in the company? For example, marketing or sales or, a product development team. Really defining what they do, what tools they use, right? To help identify the copilots that might help them. That'd be the first phase. Then, really evaluating your documents or your security or kind of your data sprawl, like we mentioned before, is going to be critical moving forward. And then once you've kind of gone through that process, figured out which ones you want, then it's really building those teams of champions, like you mentioned before. What we found for the most return on investment for like the business outcomes is really those that clearly have defined how their processes are being completed. One thing I found the most interesting was we were on a community call as partners with Microsoft, and they were talking about feedback of kind of the groups that they have right now that are working through it. And what they found was that the ones that had the most success were the ones who have had the most experience with actually managing people. And I found that very interesting. But when they kind of described it more and went into more details, it really clicked because we, as human beings, the more we interact or provide clear instructions and expectations, and we have discernment about what we want to see completed, and we clearly define that and give that to others or other people, and we know what they need. That's what the people that are going to have the most success, because when you're working with AI, the AI is just another person. And so if you don't know how to talk well to a person, clearly, provide those instructions, those expectations, and interact with it, you're probably not going to have that much success with AI. And so one of the things we'll probably see over the next couple of years is a lot of the new hires coming in being pushed a little bit quicker to managing people and team leadership to have success in regards to working with an AI or with a copilot going forward. Beyond that, you're really going to have the new, I was kidding with Hillary last week that, my daughter, who's not even yet in high school, but, will soon be, and then probably in college, that by the time she gets to college, there's probably going to be a degree on prompt engineering, right? which is really around how do I define a prompt really for the AI to understand it. And again, it's going back to those individuals that have more experience working with people and managing people are probably going to be able to pick that up quicker than the new hires coming in and having better success moving forward. So I feel that's probably one thing to really look at as you're looking at champions. Yes, you're going to have a lot of young people going, oh, this is going to be great. But the ones that are probably going to be great champions and have the most success and the most value are going to be probably the more experienced managers within the organization. And those would be the ones we'd probably look at as the champions going forward.
Yeah, and I'll supplement that a little bit to say too that with these champions that you have, these are the ones that are going to be the ones that help with the training and to say, this is how I was able to demonstrate that and say, utilize this tool and this is what it provided me and this is the value that I got out of it. I know a lot of these clients that we're speaking with, they're looking a lot towards, how can I do more with less? And so having these champions that are able to use the tool, right? So I could save time. I was able to follow up on these action items. I had more clear information because of the transcription to save with my notes, helping with streamlining with my onboarding so that my teams can get up to speed faster. These are the types of values that the teams are looking for. And so not only are, how they're able to effectively use the tool, like what Nathan said with the prompt engineering, but also those champions that are able to demonstrate the value that they've received from leveraging the tool. Those are the ones that are going to provide the success.
Yeah, Hillary, it's really, we kind of recommend what we call kind of the iteration for successful adoption for the clients that we work with that are preparing for Copilot. And it's when you form a team, of a champion and some others that want to kind of do it. They should always, it's kind of a circle reference, but
yeah, that feedback loop.
The feedback loop of curiosity. So being curious about, hey, could AI help me with this task, right? The cleanliness, always continuously keeping content clean. So you've spent all that time cleaning everything up, right, and labeling it. You want to make sure that you're continuously keeping that cleanliness going. And then it's really down to that cooperation. So as you're going through it and having, a small team test it out and have your champions built, they need to be able to come back, weekly or monthly, however often you want, to provide that feedback of going, hey, I had this problem. I did X using the tool, and provide that feedback to the rest of the group, right? Because that might lead to a lot of training ideas or tips and tricks that can be fed back to everybody. So really it's that, that feedback loop or that iteration for successful adoption is something critical for any type of product, but definitely for Copilots and AI rollout.
Yeah, that last point there, Nathan, was what I started thinking about as you were both talking, which is that, if you have that strong capability within or competency, I guess, within an organization of helping with user adoption, of embracing, user change, organizational change management, I guess you'd say, this should, in theory anyway, these types of tools should sort of slot into that same type of demand, maybe in a unique new way. But yeah, and then the other related thing I'd love to get your feedback on, maybe Hillary, this one's for you because it's a little more specifically around Dynamics, but just how much the tools that Microsoft's putting out sort of as pre-built Copilot capabilities across the applications seem to really be role focused. Just as I think of examples in my head, they're almost all focused on a role, whether it's a sales rep, sales manager, someone in more of a vendor management, purchasing kind of a role, or there's several others, customer service, right? And how much of this really is truly role-based and truly based on sort of understanding what your users do day to day?
That's a great question. And I think it's a little bit of both, right? So, as Nathan and I talked about, and I guess you're pointing it out, but those personas, right? These different personas or these different roles, they leverage this like similar applications, right? And again, just taking sales as the example. So for how sales people manage their day-to-day, they're primarily in 3 applications. They're in their email, they're in Teams, and they're in Dynamics, or they're in their CRM. And so what these copilots are doing are leveraging all of these different applications that these personas or these roles use day to day, and they're tying it all together in a way that makes sense, that allows them to streamline their activities. And so I guess to your point, to your question, it's kind of a 2-pronged event, right? So part of it, yes, is role-based, but then also part of it too is application-based, right? So these copilots, as you're building them out, they're tying in all of the different Dynamics endpoint locations and bringing it into these other and tying them to these other business applications, primarily right now, starting with, your Exchange, your Outlook, as well as Teams. And then eventually, as the whole M365 becomes more available and more adopted, everything is going to be tied together. So it's starting small because it is role-based primarily, but it's also the application as well as these two other business applications.
Yeah, so like don't lose sight of that bigger picture in addition to the role-based perspective, I guess, is what you're saying to some extent.
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to also talk about not just sort of what Microsoft is putting out there as pre-built capabilities today. Presumably there's quite a bit more in their roadmap beyond this year, and I think a lot of that will be evolving. But another element overall that I think is really, really interesting and really still very new is, the ability for partners, whether it's implementation partners or really pure ISVs, to sort of deploy solutions that use Copilot capabilities or that plug into it. I think plug in is even one of the words Microsoft's used in talking about how custom solutions might be developed. Does either of you have an outlook on what might be coming, either specifically from your teams or what you maybe see more broadly coming from Microsoft partners?
I think the easiest way to look at it is really Microsoft spent a lot of time, obviously, with their partnership with OpenAI, who's running ChatGPT. And from that standpoint, they've introduced extensions, right? So the idea that I can add extensions to Copilot. So when they built out all their Copilots, they built in the extensible framework to be utilized there. And that same type of extensible framework will work with ChatGPT and vice versa. The way I view the industry moving forward is if you look at Microsoft's Power Platform and all the partnerships that they've built over the years with connectors in like Power Automate and Power Apps, et cetera, those same partners, they're all going to be the same ones that are probably going to be working very quickly to be able to work through and do all the extensions and build all that out. So that's really my view is you're going to see a large amount of that data coming forward. So I see a lot of positive things going forward with those specific clients adding in all those extensions, and that's really going to make it pop. But again, it's all going to come down to who's actually using the Copilot to start with.
One scenario that I'm still curious about, I don't know if you thought about this one yet, maybe it's a little too far out in the future, but when I think of like Dynamics focused solutions beyond the out of the box capabilities, obviously there's, even if you just take ISVs sort of build right within the Microsoft architecture. And then there's a lot of vendors that have connectors, right? Like API based interfaces to another platform, like a cloud based. I mean, take your pick. I'm not picking on one type of solution, but content management or some kind of invoice management or really all sorts of things, integration platforms, take your pick, warehouse analytics. And for those two kinds of solutions, I think the challenge for our Copilot would be very different, but still kind of the idea of making all that data that's maybe not something Dynamics understands natively, making that accessible to a Copilot so that it can pull in the relevant data there and not sort of leave a blind spot in the overall help that it's supposed to be giving to an organization. I don't know, is that something you've thought about at all? Or do you have any expectations of how ISVs might tackle that challenge?
I think it's too new. I think the ones that are going to have success are the ones that, again, have their connectors already in place. So places like an Amazon probably will have a big one coming forward, right? Or anyone that have kind of a decent interface where like travel or airlines, those are the ones that I really see. It's the companies that have it. The ISVs themselves that are kind of building out integrations, I'm seeing that more as them building their own capabilities. If they've already got kind of their own product themselves, and utilizing like OpenAI inside of Azure to kind of add extensions to maybe already different components to like virtual agents, for example, maybe some pre-canned prompts with their capabilities to kind of help with data that's additional versus the ones that are more generic, which would be all those connectors that I mentioned before, where I'm just going to open it up that if keywords come in and you add me as an extension, then I'll be able to maybe make an airline reservation for you or pull back data for you from our system versus those ISVs building more of a solution for a company, not as much a product out there. So I think there's going to be some distinctions there going forward, but it'll be very interesting. We'll probably see in the next, I would say by the end of next year, we'll probably have a better understanding of kind of where people are going to fall into play. Are they more of an ISV with their existing product, or is it a large company that already has an extension for what they produce already, like a Delta Airlines or an Amazon.com.
I tend to agree with you. I think this is one that probably needs more time and start just rattling around in my head as a question, certainly.
It's a great question because, this really, it's, not to use the buzzwords, but at the end of the day, this really is transformative, right? It's going to ultimately transform how everybody does their job and how everybody interacts with data, right? So I think that's a solid question.
Thanks. But to bring it back sort of to a little more of your own experiences, what else are you doing in your teams with your clients to kind of prepare to deploy solutions? I know we've talked about some of the ways that organizations need to get ready, but I mean, maybe any other, specific anecdotes or specific experiences you can share at this point?
Yeah. So for us, for our clients, and again, offerings that we have like out there on AppSource, et cetera, are really around kind of preparing for the Copilot. So it might be a presentation that we did, not too long ago, specifically around Copilot. It might be talking to the clients about that. It might be showing them the AI that's available right now, like the Bean Chat Enterprise, or even if they're staying current with Windows 11, Windows 11 Copilot that's being, rolled out in the end of this year for most Windows 11 desktops. It's going through that, but then it's really evaluating their documents and, again, defining the personas in their business cases and going, how can AI in general help you out moving forward? And are you ready? Because 67%, I think it was in one of the surveys we saw out there. I don't know if it was Gartner or maybe it was Forbes. I don't remember who, Forrester, had said that, a lot of executives are looking at utilizing AI to really help them move forward. And it's those that can get it in early, have an understanding, but have a clear business case and good training that are going to have that most success moving forward. It's not going to be an end-all solve. I've seen plenty of responses from Copilot, from other AI things that are completely wrong. So you still have to have a head on your shoulders. And again, that's where the experienced individuals probably are going to be better at it, because it can cut down on tasks that I have, but I still have to put some work into it. But if I can cut out 50% of the work that I'm doing, busy work, I can be more successful going forward. And it's really figuring out what your organization needs before just going out and grabbing it. Now, again, everybody's going to be marketing some type of Copilot, other companies, Google. Everyone's coming out with some type of AI solution, and every organization has to treat it just like they do any other new product, right? They have to go in there and go, how do we do normal products? How do we evaluate them? How do we make sure it fits for our company going forward?
Exactly. And I think just to supplement that and just kind of also to emphasize too, is that a lot of our clients, they get so busy with the day-to-day activities that they don't know what they don't know. Right. So that's a lot of what, our team is able to help provide is that, education to say that, how these platforms or these tools that are coming out, how they ultimately work together and how it can help them within their defined personas.
Interesting. Yeah. And just as another ancillary thing I'll be watching for, which I think you just touched on, which is the idea that, will some of this excitement actually result in sort of measurable increases or improvements in getting companies current with their Microsoft technology, whether it is Windows or whether, on the Dynamics side, Hillary, I do wonder whether this kind of discussion and maybe even a bit of a, fear of missing out mentality or a bit of pressure coming from executives will then trigger more cloud migrations or, willingness to stay current on, other kinds of technology investments so that they can make this, at least get involved and show their leadership that these things are sort of within their reach, as opposed to, a company completely still on-prem really has no access to any of this, right? I think, with Microsoft earnings, that might even become a talking point there. So we'll just have to see, but certainly something to watch for. Anything else I didn't hit on here while we were talking that you wanted to mention about your experiences presenting on the latest with Copilot, working with customers on it? Anything else that you wanted to call out?
There definitely is a lot of interest, right? It is the new shiny object that a lot of people want to do. And I think actually the point that you were just talking about is that, there's a lot of people, they're hearing it and they're tying into the architecture of it. And they really want to make sure that they are aware of and capitalizing on what's available. So, I think that there's definitely that learning curve and making sure that they're doing the right thing and in the right way. But no, there is definitely a lot of excitement and there's a lot of things that people just don't know. It's like there is some information that's out there, but it's not quite tangible enough for them to really understand it because they can't touch it and feel it and actually do it themselves. And so they're looking for guidance.
Yeah, I think that's really the key. Really is they're looking for guidance. Microsoft has so much coming out because, again, we're well ready for it. But I think with all that noise and everything getting pushed out, everyone's getting a little confused going, well, wait a minute, you got it in Dynamics, you got it over here. I'm sitting at my office today, right? And now my Edge browser has been updated and now has, Bing Copilot, in the corner, or Edge Copilot. I think they've rebranded it this week, right? So they keep changing the name, but it's like, how do I get ready for this and really understand it moving forward? And one thing that we found surprising was some of the questions. Some of the enterprise, everyone's heard, ChatGPT. A lot of people hadn't even heard about copilots, and, they've got Microsoft in their industry. So, Microsoft's pushing it very hard. But even in this case, I think the partners were trying to catch up as well, because I think Microsoft just kind of released so much out so fast that we were just kind of like, okay, the partners are like, hey, we're the ones that are usually championing for you, and we're trying to catch up, right? So you got kind of a cart before the horse situation in some of the copilots, where the partners themselves are really trying to understand it well and guide their clients, but the clients are wanting it now. So there's obviously a little bit of risk there. So again, it'll be very interesting. I would say the spring of next year of specifically like Microsoft 365 Copilot, when it gets released for the EA, seeing if they finally did it for the mid-size companies, the small to mid-size companies, and seeing what the results are and what's coming out of there. I've got a couple buddies who work at some other companies, and they've had the opportunity to kind of play with it, and they're singing its praises. But they also mentioned that, they're very well versed and have their information really locked down, and that they have not even opened the doors for anybody that's not technical, like marketing, et cetera. So that tells me that it's going to be very interesting to see, how this is accepted, how it's rolled out, and where Microsoft goes from here. I could tell you for sure, there'll probably be, if you talk to us in 3 to 4 months, there'll probably be 5 or 6 more copilots. Probably 4 of the 5 that have been announced already will be rebranded, or they'll be merged into another copilot that they rebrand. So definitely interesting times, exciting times for sure.
What I take from what you're saying there, Nathan, is it's ultimately going to come down to partners to help their clients make sense of this. I don't think Microsoft is going to go it alone or be able to do it alone.
Yeah. But again, if you're out there and you don't have a partner, right, find one out, look out there. Like I said, we have engagements that are just come in, evaluate what you have, and give you recommendations. And if you need the partner to do that for you, do the actual actions that come out of it. Or if you can do it yourself, at least you have a plan based on what we're seeing going forward. So that's what we encourage most people to do, is kind of go out there, look at partners like enVista to come in and kind of evaluate what you have and build out those personas, build out what you need to do before you go and do Copilot. If you go out there and you get a partner who goes, oh yeah, we'll just flip it on for you right now and get it implemented, I'd be a little cautious of that, right? If they're not coming in and doing evaluation of your current business and really what your current state is, it doesn't do you any good to flip on this new tool, because it can be extremely powerful. And if not used correctly, it can be a big mess, especially if your business isn't ready for it.
Well, I think we can end it there. Thank you both so much. It was great having a chance to kind of catch up and get the sort of state of things when it comes to Copilot and hear from both of you. Really appreciate your time today. I hope we can do it again and catch up in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sounds good. We appreciate it.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Hillary and Nathan for joining me today. And this message from enVista. enVista is a Microsoft solution partner with designations in business applications, data and AI, digital apps and innovation, and modern work. Check out enVista's D365 Copilot one-day readiness workshop on AppSource. We have a link in the show notes to that. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on social media. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.